Namaste. Welcome to another episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. The government has introduced three new bills under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package that strives to reform agriculture as a sector. These laws govern agricultural produce marketing, contract farming, and also has an amendment to the Essential Commodities Act or the ECA. There's been both praise and protest regarding the same. Joining me to discuss the impact of this is Shivkumar Mishra ji, who is an entrepreneur working in the food processing and organic farming industry. He has many years of experience working with farmers in various Indian states. He's based in Kolkata. Welcome to the podcast, sir. We also have Karan Basin, who you've heard before on the Bharat Varta podcast on matters of economy and politics. He's a researcher based in Delhi. Welcome, Karan.
Thanks. Nice to be here again.
Yeah. And finally, we have Ashish Chandrakar, who's an author and columnist, and also a regular guest on the Bharat Varta podcast. Welcome, Ashish. Good to have you.
Hi, Gary.
All right. So thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, everyone. And let me begin with you, Ashish. Ashish, what do you make of the bills that have been introduced? If you can give us some background on, what they entail and why they were necessary in the first place.
Sure. So there are three bills which have come in this monsoon session and passed by both houses of parliament. All three pertain to changes which were already made in June as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat package ordinances. So the bills essentially replace the ordinances which were already gazetted in June. There is the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill, which basically says that farmers can now sell their produce anywhere in the country via interstate trades, and APMCs will not be mandatory. Basically, the mandis can be put up by anyone, any private party, etc. But farmers can sell to farmers don't have to go to mandis necessarily. Of course, the mandis still continue to be there, so they can always use them. There is Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement of Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill, which is essentially pertaining to the contract farming area, which essentially says that any buyer can basically enter into a contract with the farmers, supporting the process of cultivation, etc., in terms of technology and know-how and whatever is needed in terms of physical equipment, etc. Also agree on prices with the farmer at which the transactions will happen, and then that contract can essentially give like a visibility to the farmer for the farming season in terms of selling the crop. And of course, finally, there's the Essential Commodities Amendment Bill, which says that a whole bunch of agriculture commodities have been taken out of the purview of stock limits. There'll be no inspections and no questions asked on why someone is storing certain quantities of commodities. And this will actually enable traders as well as farmers to match demand and supply without having to answer about why they are trying to hoard, some of these commodities. So they can buy at a lower price, sell at a higher price at a later point, and so on. So I think that's the intent for the ECA, apart from, of course, limiting or reducing the Inspector Raj, which pertains in the system.
Right. Thanks so much for laying that out, Ashish. We'll delve into the nuances of each of them. Mishra ji, I want to come to you after this, which is you've worked with farmers for many years now. What has been the reaction of some of the people that you've spoken to recently? And, do you think this will help them or hurt them in some way?
No, in my opinion, these changes are going to help them. I was in Arunachal Pradesh for last 3-4 days, and I did not hear anything. In fact, some of the FPO out there I spoke to, they were quite happy with the provisions. The problem is, I think it is more about politics rather than real. So, in my opinion, these amendments are going to help farmer and FPOs.
Okay. Karan, Farmers are at the crux of the rural economy, and often we find that even though the government takes active interest in their issues, many of them are not able to sustain their livelihood. Do you think these reforms will change that?
Absolutely. One of the key things that we have discussed many times, in literature, one of the constant features of agricultural policy of India has been price support. And this has been, there since the time we started talking about food buffers, etc. The problem with this policy is that it is for the benefit of those farmers who actually have marketable surplus. And these are large farmers, the big farmers. So small farmers don't really benefit from the price policy as such. And MSP is also not given for all the commodities. It's given only for certain key crops, cereal, pulses, etc. And it distorts. So any price intervention by any government usually distorts market. So the advantage for small farmers is that now they can have access to private mandis, which will give them information from market interaction of demand and supply regarding price movements, and then they can really produce something that probably would fetch them a better price. To give you an example, horticulture, for instance, is a very viable sort of area where we don't have much farmers focusing on, and that is not really land intensive. So, a bulk of our small farmers can now look at that as an alternative to the rice wheat sort of cultivation that they've followed for many years. In many ways, this price policy is from an area or from an era where we were striving to get food security. So this was geared towards ensuring that we produce as much as what we need to ensure food security, because famines, etc., were a regular feature in the post-independence era. We have long come since then. Now we have adequate marketable, we have adequate food production to not just satisfy our domestic consumption but also to export. So I think this change in policy was much needed, because we really need to start looking at agriculture as a viable private enterprise geared towards profit making and geared towards maximizing the surplus, rather than just sustaining the sort of basic necessity or whatever is the food requirement of the country.
Yeah, I was actually going to come to you on that, which is that, often we find farmers are mollycoddled rather than, empowered. That's, there is no income tax. You mentioned the MSP as well. There are often loan waiver of elections and so on. So is it finally time for us to treat them as entrepreneurs rather than, how we look at them?
As you asked this question once before as well, and I said that it's a pretty political question. I don't see a tax on farmers happening anytime soon, but I do see this as a process of recognizing that people involved in primary sector of the economy are also entrepreneurs, and they must also be treated at par when it comes to giving them certain rights with regards to economic freedom, etc. Let me put it this way: we've had this entire discussion and debate for many years. In fact, that we should have access to private markets for farmers, and so on and so forth. Now, for 80% of our economy, which is outside the primary sector, they are free to sell at whatever price they want, wherever they want. That is not the case for agricultural sector. Now, when we give them that right, they can all people don't understand this, that markets perform a very vital function of price discovery, and price discovery helps farmers decide what they want to produce, how much they want to produce, and how they want to sell and market it. And I think that is the first step towards a formal recognition that farmers are also entrepreneurs in their own right. Whether that leads to a subsequent income tax on them or not is a political question which will have many repercussions. So I would not like to get into that. Probably sometime, maybe in the next 3-4 decades, we may have that, but not right now. And the key thing to mention over here is also that when we gave this freedom to the rest of the economy, it was in 91. It took us nearly 30 years to give farmers the same treatment that we gave to the private sector.
Great point.
So we need to be very,
Yeah, that's a great point. Mishra ji, we find that, agriculture sector in general is a very complicated ecosystem of stakeholders, right? And often, their interests and priorities may always not align. In fact, you have plenty of middlemen, vested and incumbents in the system. How do you think these bills will address those people actually?
I think even middlemen are also part of the ecosystem. They are also market makers. But the impact of this marketing, the bill we have about this trade and commerce facilitation bill, this is going to change. This is, in fact, in my opinion, this is going to give us a broad-based tax structure. Because if you go through the bill, the first condition for a person to trade in agri commodities is to have a PAN card. You know what? वो गांव में इतने लोग ट्रेड करते हैं, लेकिन वो एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोड्यूस के गांव में अपना टैक्स बचा जाते हैं. सो ये जो चीज है, दिस नेसेसिटी अबाउट पॉसिंग अ पैन कार्ड टू ट्रेड इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट वन. लोगों को ये मैं देखता हूँ इवन इन नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न स्टेट्स देयर आर मेनी पीपल who earn from trading in agricultural commodities but they don't pay taxes. एक तो ये हुआ. दूसरा ये हुआ कि फार्मर्स के लिए ये जैसे एक शिकायत है ना, there are people complaining that government is going to hand over farmers to corporates. In my opinion, it is the other way around. The government is going to hand over corporates to farmers. अगर आपको फार्मर से के साथ ट्रेड करना है तो आप कारपोरेट हैं तो कारपोरेट के साथ ही ट्रेड करें. अभी क्या है, इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे कोई फार्मर ट्रेड नहीं करेगा बाहर वालों से. देयर आर विलेजेस विद देयर ओन कंपनीज which are going to trade with the outsiders, FPOs. Farmers are incorporating public limited company, cooperative societies. So ऐसा नहीं है कि कारपोरेट्स के हवाले कर दे रहे हैं. इनफैक्ट कारपोरेट्स अभी फार्मर से डील करना है तो उनको फार्मर्स के जो अपनी कंपनियां उनसे डील करना पड़ेगा. तो ये मार्केटिंग का जो इशू है ये बड़ा अच्छा है जो मुझे लगता है. फिर देयर आर चेंजेस गोइंग टू हैपन, so the sooner we reconcile with it the better. मैं तो इतने सालों से ट्रेड करता हूँ इनके साथ में और वो मैंने यही समझा है कि हमको we have to go according to farmers requirement. हम अपनी रिक्वायरमेंट, मेरी अपनी रिक्वायरमेंट है that may be with regard to quality, grading, all those things. लेकिन वो क्या उगाएगा, कैसे ट्रेड करेगा, वो हमको उसके हिसाब से जाना पड़ेगा. और ये जो रिस्ट्रिक्शंस वगैरह हटाए हैं इस पर आपके स्टोरेज वगैरह पे, ये अच्छा है. अभी भी if we want to compete in the international market, ये सारी चीज़ें ज़रूरी हैं. हम पिछले ऑलमोस्ट 10 सालों से हमारा एग्री एक्सपोर्ट जो है वो बड़ा अफेक्ट हुआ है इसकी वजह से. और हमको अगर compete करना है तो ये चेंजेस लाने थे, वो लाई है गवर्नमेंट. मुझे तो बड़ा अच्छा है. और मैं अभी आया हूँ अरुणाचल से, जो मेरे पास फीडबैक है वो यही है कि फार्मर्स आर हैप्पी. उनको ये लगता है कि लोग कहते हैं ना कि स्मॉल फार्मर के लिए गवर्नमेंट ये फंसा दे रही है उनको. नहीं, मुझे नहीं लगता है. स्मॉल एंड मीडियम लेवल के जो फार्मर हैं वो अब खुद तो डील नहीं करेंगे, उनकी कंपनियां डील करेंगी. सो ये चेंजेस अच्छे हैं, ये इनकी रिक्वायरमेंट थी और अच्छा हुआ कि गवर्नमेंट जल्दी ले आई. मुझे लगता है कि आने वाले 1-2 सालों में तो इसके बहुत सारे पॉजिटिव चेंजेस देखने को मिलेंगे.
Mr. Raji, one related question based on whatever you said. Can you talk a little bit about the potential for agriculture exports going forward?
Agriculture export, in fact, our agriculture export in last 4-5 years, उसमें जो प्रॉब्लम हुई है ना, that is with regard to quality, grading और सोर्सिंग. और इसमें क्या हुआ है ना कि पिछले 10 सालों में देयर हैव बीन मेनी न्यू एंट्रेंट लाइक वियतनाम, श्रीलंका, and some of the African nations. तो हमको उनसे compete करना पड़ेगा, and these reforms are going to help us. अगर हम अभी क्या है कि जैसे कुछ तो कमोडिटी ऐसी हैं जिसमें हम ग्रेडिंग कर लेते हैं इंटरनेशनल स्टैंडर्ड के हिसाब से, मार्केट कंडीशन के हिसाब से, बायस के हिसाब से, लेकिन कुछ कमोडिटीज ऐसी हैं जिसमें ग्रेडिंग हम नहीं कर पाते हैं। क्यों? क्योंकि हमको जिनसे डील करना रहता है, जहाँ से सोर्सिंग करते हैं, वहाँ पे वो फैसिलिटी नहीं है। तो हमको ये फैसिलिटी, जब तक कारपोरेट्स नहीं आएंगे तो वो फैसिलिटी क्रिएट भी नहीं हो सकती। इसके बाद कैसा करेगा इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड में, हम कैसा करेंगे, वो डिपेंड करेगा कि हम कितनी जल्दी इसको अडॉप्ट करते हैं और चेंज करते हैं खुद को इसके हिसाब से। और मुझे लगता है फ्यूचर अच्छा है।
Right. So Ashish, there was a lot of discussion on price, right? Both Karan and Mitra ji also brought this up. And often we find that, the government as such prioritizes, let's say, food inflation over farmers getting a fair due as such. Your take on that?
Yeah, so this is a very real issue, Carrie. See, in the agriculture value chain, basically, who will keep the surplus? That's the question, right? Typically, what is happening is that farmers are getting potentially only about 35-40% of the retail price on a good day. For certain commodities, it could be as less as 10-15% also. Can you increase the farmer's share of the retail price by, say, 15-20%? Can it go to 50-55%? I think that is the question. Now, how do you increase the farmer's income, which is essentially a proxy for the retail food inflation also? So if you have to balance both, which is that your farmer's income goes up, but the food inflation doesn't go up, then essentially you can try productivity, for example, where farmers can look at other avenues for selling rather than just the domestic market, exports being one of them. But higher productivity also means higher quality investments, technology investments, and so on. As Mishra ji said, the international standards could be very different than domestic ones. But purely on the prices part, there are only three ways in which the prices can go up without hurting the consumer, which is that government offers an MSP, which is what it is doing today. It is not working very well for most of the small farmers, or it can mandate a price for a private market, which currently happens, let's say, in the case of sugarcane, where the sugarcane processors and mills are expected to give a certain price threshold to all the farmers. Now, this is actually the point of contention politically right now, because government has not mandated any MSP, and it is impractical. I mean, the fact is that because of that sugarcane market structure, states like Maharashtra and Karnataka, which are not very rain intensive, have been cultivating the crop because the mills already pay a standard price or a fixed price to the farmers, right? So administered price mechanism in an open market don't always reconcile. So the third option, of course, is, as again Mishra ji said, is to farmers to organize themselves and cut the middlemen, which is what is precisely the objective of this entire law. The intention is, like जैसे Mishra ji ने कहा, it's not just about the government trying to do something, it's also about farmers having to come together and run this like a business. There'll be a transition period, definitely, which can potentially lead to increase in retail inflation, food inflation, especially also because the ECA also has been amended, in a more liberal way. So I suppose in the transition years, next 2-3 years, there could be some food inflation actually. But eventually, once farmers organize and they start taking a greater share from the surplus in the value chain, that would then stabilize the prices. In my view, this will be a 2-3 year process, Gary.
Right. So Karan, we've discussed enough of the agriculture, economic aspects as such, right? I want to come to you on the political aspects because you mentioned that earlier as well, right? You've seen that there's been a political fallout as a result of this. The Shiromani Akali Dal has quit the National Democratic Alliance. We also saw protests by the Congress and the opposition parties in the same regard. So what do you make of this?
I think everyone recognizes this because Congress had it in its manifesto, and one should really ask Akali Dal, why did they wait, for so many days before the law being passed? Because this ordinance was obviously, cleared by the cabinet, which, by the way, Harsimrat Kaur Badal was a part of. So where was the protest back then? So it's very obvious that this is all happening because of political compulsions and because of domestic factors that sort of govern the politics of states of Punjab and Haryana. But I would at the same time like to categorically mention that farmers over the years in every stakeholder consultation they've talked about this particular issue, and they've wanted this particular act to go away. They wanted APMCs to be diluted. They wanted private markets. They wanted even to the extent of Essential Commodities Act to be diluted so that they could gain from speculation in terms of when prices skyrocket and stuff. And these are farmers, mind you, small farmers, big farmers, whether from Punjab, Haryana, etc. So when it comes to actual farmers, they're really, as I think even Mishra ji mentioned, that they're really happy about these reforms happening. The problem is that our farm sector, is sort of very complex in the way there are these agrarian relations that have been formulated over the last couple of decades. And these agrarian relations are such that big farmers are also typically the ones who control the markets, and they're also the ones who are lenders, money lenders. So there's a de facto feudal relationship that has come into place in our rural economy, and it's typically extractive in nature, and it is very similar to the relation that East India Company used to have with our peasants. And it is exactly that kind of a relationship, that kind of a production relation that exists in the rural economy, the feudal structure, that these three bills are attempting to sort of dismantle. In one of the previous such conversations, I mentioned that what we are witnessing is a gradual dismantling of Nehruvian socialism. Whenever you have this kind of an attempt to remove the elites or the so-called existing order, they are going to protest, and that protest is a natural outcome of this bargain of sorts. So these protests are definitely politically motivated, and I can understand why they are happening. The good thing is that unlike land acquisition, this time around the government has not really budged, and they're willing to go all out and go push through this particular reform. So I'm very optimistic that the results will really show. I think Ashish sir is saying 2-3 years. I think probably it might take a bit longer, because we really need a kind of heavy capex investment in logistics and supply chain, which will take more than 3 years. But once that happens, we will have a much more liberal, much more productive, and much more efficient production across the rural sort of production stream value chain.
Right. Ashish, same question to you as well. Not much political repercussions. I mean, there isn't much you can do anyway, right? With a government that has 303 seats. We saw that the protests as well were lacking, Your comments?
Yeah. See, the thing, Gary, is for any measure which you take on the reform side, there will always be some opposition. So, I mean, you cannot factor that in as a key driver for your decision making, right? What, as Karan said, like this is something which will evolve over the next few years. I mean, maybe I'm a little too optimistic on the number of years, but the fact is that it is good for people in general. I think this is a bit like the GST RERA type situation where people who are in the business day to day know that this is going to be useful. They may, of course, rant about it themselves while the transition is there. We will also all rant about food prices in the next year, I'm pretty sure, because some of the prices will go up definitely. But I think they will stabilize over the years. People will appreciate this. I think what is happening in Punjab and Haryana is that the APMC started there. They were like the food bowls of the country in terms of the procurement structure. FCI was very strong. Government used to buy a lot from those states. So there, the Adatya system or the middleman system is much stronger compared to the rest of the country. And in fact, in like even the central government agencies like NAFED, etc., have found it very difficult to get a mandi license in those states. So that constituency which today runs the mandis is very close to the ruling elites. I mean, SAD in Punjab, which is the rural party, and also the Jat lobby in Haryana, which has controlled the state politically for many years. So this opposition is very, I mean, from their perspective, it's a valid opposition in the sense that they will also have to readjust to the new ways of doing business. They can restructure, of course, in terms of like the middlemen who lose business can always start a FPO, enroll farmers. It's a difficult task. There's no new capital requirement, etc. They can do it, but it's a big change. So any change which happens will always disturb people. So as such, I think the political ramifications will be there in Western UP, Punjab, Haryana, parts of Rajasthan, MP, and in Maharashtra. But I think that should not really deter the government from really going full throttle and ensuring that this stabilizes over the next 3-4 years.
Right.
I just want to come in over here. Just a quick point. While we are talking about reforms, a lot of them are really good and stuff, but there's this one particular ambiguity which the government has left in the amendment to the Essential Commodities Act. And while some people might say that I'm asking for too much, or that whatever has been done is also bold enough, so we don't have to go a bit steps further. But I think that retaining the provision for government to intervene in the event of extraordinary price rise without explicitly mentioning what that price rise is kind of counter sort of intuitive, given that we are trying to sort of liberalize agriculture.
But
My
isn't that a
guess,
necessary guardrail? I mean, isn't that something that's expected?
well, let's think of it this way: which other country does actually have such government intervention when it comes to controlling supply, logistics, and production of agricultural output? I mean, I can't think of any developed economy, or even most emerging economies, to have such kind of regulations. So why do we need it, or why is India so special compared to them? Some of them even didn't have it when they were primarily an agrarian economy. For instance, you look at the experience of England during the sort of pre-industrial revolution. They didn't have such norms and regulations in place. Still, they were doing pretty fine. The point that I'm trying to make is that I think government feared a price rise, because of which it really put this in place as sort of a safeguard, so that it can intervene should food inflation go up. I think politically, I think it's a very important sort of aspect for the government, because they don't really want prices to go up. But from an economic standpoint, I think it is counterintuitive to have this driver as a part of the policy. And I mean, of course, investment is going to come into the sector irrespective. But last thing we want is for a sort of any sort of private investor to have the fear that, okay, should I put in say a particular amount on distribution, logistics, and warehousing, and tomorrow government says that, okay, I'm going to intervene and I'm going to put an export ban. So what happens to my investment? And I think I don't have a problem with an intervention in the event of an extraordinary price rise. I have a problem with not really quantifying what qualifies as an extraordinary price increase. Is it a 10% increase in a short span of time? Is it a 10% increase annualized? What do they mean by extraordinary price increase? I think that concept needs to be sort of clarified in more detail, and it has to be also, we need to keep in mind that India, because of its nature of the economy, prices are not really uniform across the country. So what this means is that government may intervene in certain markets but not in certain markets, which I think could be problematic, and we may end up in a situation where we may not realize the full potential of the reform.
Right. In case government steps in, is what you mean?
Yes, in case government steps in case it continues to, for instance, the onion sort of ban on exports. There's no price pressure, yet the government has banned, onion exports. Rahul Bajoria of Barclays sent a very interesting graph. There is no price pressure on onions, yet they feared that onion prices may go up before the Bihar elections, so they imposed that restriction. I think we now need to come out of this sort of, Nehruvian policy playbook. In fact, we should burn that playbook if we must, to ensure that we don't have those policy options available should we need them.
Sure. So, Mishra ji, I know that you might have some comments associated with that as well, but do you see this existing, do you see a dismantling of the existing political incumbents as such, in terms of associations, groups, and so on?
Yes. It is going to dismantle many associations and groups, because lots of state-owned infrastructure is under control of ruling parties in different states. Even I think it is even in Kerala. I have seen it in Kerala. I have seen it in Bengal. So this is going to certainly this is going to dismantle. Then there is problem. Theoretically, what is as per APMC Act is not there practically. अभी मैं आशीष मैं लेके आऊँगा मेघालय से, so if I buy turmeric from मेघालय, वो लैकाडोंग टर्मरिक मैं प्रैक्टिकल बात बता रहा हूँ, लैकाडोंग टर्मरिक मैं लेके I am paying GST, I am paying the local mandi tax there in Meghalaya, लेकिन the moment it enters Bengal, वो रोक लेंगे, you have to pay it. What I am going to say is show them my bill. नहीं ये हम नहीं मानते हैं, आपको देना पड़ेगा. This is kind of, it is at times it is kind of गुंडागर्दी. अभी हमको उससे किसी न किसी तरीके से तो निपटना पड़ता है. So all these things are going to be affected in coming 1-2 years. और कम से कम this APMC monopoly should go. It should have been gone long ago. लेकिन ठीक है, जब भी आए तभी ठीक है. और political implications इसके हैं. Let me tell you something about आलू trade in West Bengal. ये बड़ा politically जैसे the kind of situation that is with regard to onion in Maharashtra, बंगाल में आलू है, महाराष्ट्र में अनियन है, so ये अफेक्ट करता है और ये जाना चाहिए, it should go as soon as possible.
So Ashish, again, moving on from this, there's often this rhetoric that we need to reduce our dependency on farming and agriculture, and but if you look at it, food is perhaps the single most important commodity, right, that we can produce. What are you hopeful for going forward? I mean, do you think that we will, as Mishra ji alluded to earlier, that we will grow in strength on the export side of things, and this can actually become an advantage for us?
Yeah. See, we have discussed this before, Carry, on a couple of episodes. Farming or agriculture forms about 15% of India's GDP, supporting almost 60%, I mean, depending on how you see it, say 55 to 65, 70% of the population, directly or indirectly. So the fact is that irrespective of what we do or don't do, that equation is lopsided and it needs to be basically managed, right? So either the farming has to become much more value adding in terms of being able to get prices or realizations which can sustain those people, or the number of people who are engaged in those activities have to reduce. They need to do something else, right? Which is primarily industrialization. The fact is that some of these changes were already there. Like 18 states already have laws which allow private mandis. 22 states allow direct purchases. 20 states allow contract farming. And as Mr. Ji said, Kerala and Bihar don't even have APMCs. Like when the first time the Vajpayee government asked for the APMC removal in 2006, Bihar actually did that. One of the few first decisions of the Nitish Kumar government then. So the fact is these laws can be removed. The protests tend to be more political and because of vested interests. And when the lobbies of, as Karan explained, the same farmer being moneylender, also being the middleman, also being the distributor, I think when that chain breaks, that is when the real impact will come into play. So I'm actually quite hopeful that this will happen, because law-wise, states have done it before, and why can't, if the states can do it, so this can be done nationwide also. What really matters is that we need to focus on high value adding crops which can get better price realization in the export markets, right? So, for example, can we have much more, say, palm oil exports from India, or mustard or sunflower? I mean, why do we have to keep growing grains only? Even pulses, only now we are beginning to export, right? So I think that to me is the biggest opportunity, which I feel which will happen, which will be facilitated. The second thing I am quite optimistic about is the farmer producer organizations. The FPOs actually were launched before the pandemic. Modi government actually did a launch in Chitrakoot in end of Feb, just after the union budget, in which 10,000 FPOs were to be supported with an outlay of 7,000 crores using NABARD and other financing facilities. But soon after the launch, of course, the pandemic struck. So I guess I'm guessing the FPOs have not taken off on the ground yet, although India does have a few thousand FPOs even today, about 5,000 of them. But the fact is that we need to have many more. The small and Amul example is a classic example. the real small producer there of milk doesn't deal with any corporate interests, right? They deal via Amul. Amul is one of the best managed. We discussed on one of our weeklies, Carry, that Amul is now the 16th largest dairy company in the world on the Rabobank list of largest dairy companies with a 5 billion turnover. So if this can happen in one area, it can happen in other areas also. So optimistic about two things: more agriculture exports and more FPOs, and hence more corporatization of the farming.
So closing comments from Mishraji and Karan. So Mishraji, what are you hopeful for will happen in 5, 10, 20 years down the line? What are you optimistic about?
We have started dismantling all old structures, and I always believe that if we started it today, it will take another 15 years to dismantle it completely. And these structures need to go. वो उनको जाना ही है, वो जाएंगे. So all these FPOs and farmer organization, just imagine there are people sitting in Arunachal. They are incorporating public limited companies. मैंने मजाक में कहा, मैंने कहा अभी 3 साल बाद कोई नया सीए आएगा ना, तो ये फार्मर्स they can teach him कि भाई कंपनी इनकॉर्पोरेशन में क्या पेपर्स लगते हैं. सो ये जो चेंज है ना, दिस इज गोइंग टू हैपन. ये कोई रोक नहीं सकता है. इनफैक्ट इन माय ओपिनियन ये गवर्नमेंट ऐसी है जिसने फार्मर्स को सबसे ज्यादा ऑर्गेनाइज किया है. इट हैड नेवर हैपेंड बिफोर. फार्मर्स को सबसे ज्यादा ऑर्गेनाइज करने का काम इस गवर्नमेंट ने किया है. और कंट्रारी टू दैट लोग इसी पे प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं कि ये गवर्नमेंट जो है वो फार्मर्स के इंटरेस्ट के अगेंस्ट में काम करती है. लेकिन मेरा ओपिनियन ये है कि एंड ट्रेडर्स आर आल्सो गोइंग टू चेंज अकॉर्डिंगली. ट्रेडर्स को भी चेंज होना है. एज आई सेड अर्लियर, जितने जल्दी हम एक्सेप्ट कर लें दीज चेंजेस उतना अच्छा है, उतना अच्छा पूरे सेक्टर के लिए है. एक चीज मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि दीज रिफॉर्म्स have to be complemented with the sector reform. मैं एग्रीकल्चर की रिफॉर्म की बात कर रहा हूँ. सो ये तो मार्केटिंग के रिफॉर्म्स हैं और बाकी मार्केट मेकिंग है, वो कैसे होगी. लेकिन पर्टिकुलरली द प्रोसेस ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर इटसेल्फ, उसको एक चेंज होना चाहिए अगले 10 साल में. तो द फ्यूचर बहुत अच्छा है, बहुत ब्राइट है, मुझे लगता है.
Fantastic. Karan, coming to you at the end. You mentioned that this is the 1991 movement for Indian agriculture, right? So what is the impact we can expect in the coming decades?
Okay, so 2 or 3 quick points. First is, of course, this is definitely a 91 moment for India's agriculture, and there are no two doubts about it. And what we should expect is that we will see a greater consolidation of land holdings. We will see a lot of people move away from agriculture as a process of selling their land and realizing that they will end up making more money by sort of moving out of agriculture and moving into allied activities. And what I mean is that some people may go into horticulture, some people may go into poultry farming, some people may go into food processing. So hardcore cultivation will probably be restricted to large farmers, and a lot of people will go to higher value sort of production streams within the primary sector itself. Apart from this, I am very optimistic about free trade agreements that have been made possible by this. A lot of people don't realize this, but whenever we talk about signing free trade agreements with US, UK, EU, etc., one of the key problems is agricultural sector. Now that we have started to dismantle the sort of state regulatory regime, I think those free trade agreements have become more sort of plausible over the next couple of months, quarters, or maybe even years, depending upon which country we are looking at. Now, those trade agreements are important for us to also have the kind of manufacturing boom or the sort of non-farm productive jobs that we really want. So the impact of this is not just going to be on the primary sector, but also it will be on the manufacturing sector, and also in terms of improved trade with some of the Western countries, because they're going to buy a lot of our products. Of course, that requires us to sort of set the quality controls and quality standards, etc. But I do think that is going to happen the moment we have sort of more investment coming in. One quick point is that this price policy or the APMC policy was actually done with the intention of providing income support to farmers. That was the clear objective behind it. Now that we have direct cash transfers in the form of PM Kisan, that objective of the price policy is being met through direct cash transfers. And I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this. The prime objective of MSP was to give income support to farmers. Now we are giving it through cash transfers. So, dismantling of APMCs is a no-brainer, because we do need private markets to step in. And I know a lot of people are saying that private markets may not offer the same price as MSP. Why don't you codify them in private markets, etc., etc. But the point is, if I'm a farmer and if I have to sell my produce, I'll sell it in a private market only if it is giving me a price which is better than the MSP. So price realization is also going to go up for the farm sector. Net
Great
net
point.
what we'll see is that the surplus available with the farmer is going to go up, and that is going to be reinvested on his sort of farm, which will improve the agricultural productivity. A lot of people think that we since we are a food surplus country, we have reached the productivity limit, but fact is that there are other countries which are at least twice or thrice more productive when it comes to farming as an activity. And I think that is exactly what Mishra sir was saying when he was talking about changing the way we farm. Now, on that front, I think government has improved a lot, because they've introduced soil health cards. They're trying to make it a more formal, scientific, method of cultivation. Irrigation, for instance, has increased dramatically over the last couple of years. So I do foresee private plus public investments in the primary sector going up, and that is going to really drive its value addition in the sort of GDP composition. So it wouldn't be surprising for me if in the short term we see an increase in the agricultural GVA as a share of the economy, but it will ultimately start coming down once manufacturing activity comes. One of the things that also I wanted to talk about, since I'm talking about the spillover benefits to the manufacturing sector, when industrial revolution really happened in UK, in fact, wherever industrial revolution has happened, the precursor was always surplus, in the primary sector. So there was marketable surplus produced by agriculture, which then went into industry. So we never had that, which is why probably, land laws are also one factor. Land labor laws are also factors, but the lack of agricultural surplus is also an important factor why we missed the bus of manufacturing and went ahead with services-led growth.
Great point. Yeah, Mishra ji, you had a point to add here?
हाँ, मैं ये कह रहा था ना कि ये जो आशीष ने कहा ना, प्रोड्यूस मिक्स को चेंज करेगा। बहुत सारे स्टेट्स में नीति आयोग इज ट्राइंग इट, मैंने सिक्किम में देखा है। और क्योंकि जो अभी करंट प्रोड्यूस है वहाँ का, उसका कुछ मिक्स चेंज करें, और ये जो मोनोपोली है रीजन्स की या स्टेट की, वो धीरे धीरे जानी चाहिए। सो ये जो प्राइस पैरिटी आएगी अगले 10-15 साल में नेशनल लेवल पे, वो ऐसे ही आएगी, प्रोड्यूस मिक्स चेंज करके और नए क्रॉप इंट्रोड्यूस करके। सो मुझे यही कहना था कि ये चेंजेस जो हैं वो आ रहे हैं बहुत सारे। लाइक अभी 4-5 years back, you would find high curcumin turmeric only in Meghalaya. Now we find it even in Andhra Pradesh, Vizag, and in some part of Tamil Nadu. So ये changes आ रहे हैं, ये changes होंगे और ये अच्छे हैं।
Yeah, I was saying I just want to end on an optimistic note here from my side, which is that on the FPOs, right, especially, that could be the biggest change which will transform how the agriculture is done in the country. See, the whole APMC thing came into play because British wanted to buy cheap cotton from India, right? So this started in 1880s when India was shipping cotton to Manchester, where specific cotton yards were set in. I mean, if you go to the dockyard area of Mumbai, those lanes are still there, right? Like Solapur lane, Karnataka lane, all of those lanes are there where people used to come and sell their, not just, agri commodities, but commodities in general. From there on to an Amul example, to the fact that now there is an agri-tech type setup coming in because of the FPOs getting professional folks. I'll give you a couple of examples. I was reading about this in one of the magazines. So like there's a FPO in Rajasthan, which is run by a lady by the name of Savitri Gaur. She runs FPO with about 2,000 women who are participating in the process. They've raised capital, and as Mishra ji said, they've actually formed a private limited company with actually full professional setup in terms of management and so on, right? This is also a job opportunity in itself. I mean, people who are really interested in agriculture can actually be professionals in finance, marketing, operations, supply chain in these FPOs, and can also negotiate with the buyers, right? Another great example is from Karnataka, where one retired gentleman by the name of T.V. Gopinath has been running a FPO called Rayata Mitra, which is again has got about 1,000 odd farmers who are members, and they have been looking at cultivation of super crops in India. So they've been trying to change the mix of the farming so that not just farmers grow new crops, but they also have better price realization. So these ideas, technology, small startups trying to do agri-tech things, Uberization of farm equipments, what Mahindra started. I mean, these are all great examples which can only accelerate if the FPO succeed. And I'm pretty sure that with all the changes coming in, there will be some roadblocks as we go along, like there always are in India, because no law is perfect. There'll be some some issue here and there, like on ECA, Karan pointed out. I'm pretty sure that there are other issues also, niggling things which need to be taken care of as we go along. But the system will stabilize, and this provides a great launchpad for the sector.
Yeah, personally, I'm pretty excited about the role technology and innovation is going to play in the sector as well. So, all right, that's a fantastic note to end the podcast on. It's not often, that you get to hear as much optimism about agriculture. But thank you so much for joining us, Shiv Mishra ji. Thank you so much, Ashish and Karan. It was a real pleasure discussing this with you guys. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by the team at Bharat Varta. If you liked this podcast, then don't forget to share, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite platforms. We're available on Anchor, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker, YouTube, and a host of other platforms. We started Bharat Varta to facilitate long-form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you do wish to offer us any feedback on the content or anything else, do reach out to us on social media or get in touch with us on our website, www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.